So I often go to this quaint coffee shop near my apartment. It's my little sanctuary, you know. This particular day, a weekend evening around 7, I found my usual cozy corner and sat down with a coffee and a magazine to unwind. There weren't many people around, which I initially thought was perfect. But then I got this eerie feeling. You know, when you can sense someone's presence without actually seeing them. I glanced over, and sure enough, there was this guy sitting not too far from me, doing something really weird. His one arm was motionless on the armrest, and the other was slowly moving under the table towards me. And get this, he was holding a pair of scissors. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Even though I'm near-sighted, I could tell he had been staring at me for a while. But I didn't recognize him at all, and I had no clue what he could possibly want. Trying to stay calm, I pretended not to notice and kept reading my magazine. After a bit, when I hadn't heard any more movement, I mustered up the courage to sneak another peek. Thankfully, the seat was empty. He had left. Relieved, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But then, out of nowhere, this same guy whispered right behind me. I spun around, and he was standing there, way too close for comfort, still holding the scissors. The way he was gripping them, opening and closing, I was terrified. I wanted to scream for help, but we were isolated in that corner, and I feared any noise might provoke him. What happened next is burned into my memory. He stepped closer and slowly raised the scissors as if to stab me. But then he turned them towards himself, and I can hardly bear to recount this. He started cutting his own face. The blood, it was horrifying. I was frozen, watching in shock as he mutilated himself, then calmly left as if nothing happened. I couldn't bring myself to go back there for weeks. When I finally did, met by a friend this time, everything seemed normal. But later that night, I realized I had left my phone at the coffee shop. Going back to get it felt like the last thing I wanted to do, but I convinced myself it would be fine. The staff was helpful and said they found my phone leading me to a back room meant for the manager. But when I entered, no one was there. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was coming from a drawer in the room. As I reached to open it, the ringing stopped, and as I stared at the drawer, 2 scissor blades pierced through the top. I was petrified, barely managing to open the drawer, only to find a severed hand holding my phone. I slammed the drawer shut and ran out as if the devil himself was after me. I thought it was over, until one night, while listening to the radio, I heard my phone ring through the speakers. The realization hit me. The sound wasn't coming from the radio. My phone was somewhere inside my house. Following the ring led me to the front door. And outside, it compelled me to the very coffee shop where everything started, now crowded with people all holding scissors. That's when I realized they weren't looking at me. They couldn't. In a nightmarish ritual, they blinded themselves with their scissors. The horror of that moment, the realization of what was happening, it's something I can never unsee, even though I wish I could. It sounds unbelievable, I know, And after telling this story, you might think I'm making it all up, trying to mess with you or something. But this experience, this endless nightmare, it's something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I don't know what it was. A serial killer's game, a twisted cult, or just the product of a deranged mind targeting me for reasons I can't fathom. All I know is, it felt all too real, and it's a memory I'm desperate to forget. I'm not sure when it all began, but my life took a wicked turn the day I joined the pottery class at the local art center. There she was, an ethereal beauty among us, her grace and delicacy making the lump of clay beneath her fingers seem like the purest form of art. Me, well, I've been told I'm quite the catch. Tall, fair, with a strong jawline, essentially your textbook definition of a handsome guy. It's probably why I've always been drawn to purity and perfection like her. Her name was Mia. There was something almost otherworldly about her, a kind of serenity that made the chaotic world around us stand still. I decided almost instantly that she had to be mine. As luck would have it, we ended up teaming for a project. Up close, I couldn't help but notice that despite the sweltering heat in the studio, Mia remained perfectly poised, not a bead of sweat on her porcelain skin. Driven by a mix of admiration and curiosity, I reached out to touch her hand under the pretense of examining our creation, only for her to recoil sharply, nicking herself with a scalpel in the process. Blood should have followed, but there was none. Only the stark, unsettling whiteness of her skin. Days later, an aloof Mia turned down my offer to walk her home, leaving me alone with my thoughts until the class coordinator, a woman with an unpleasant demeanor and sallow skin, approached me. "She's taken," she snidely remarked, hinting at Mia's supposed lover who, in her words, was oddly unsuitable for someone so seemingly perfect. Driving the image of the mismatched couple from my mind, I focused on winning Mia over, only to be met with circumstances that grew stranger by the day. Despite securing a date, Mia's sudden departure from the cafe we were in, coupled with the bizarre and horrifying discovery of a piece of torn, flesh-like fabric that bore her scent, plunged me deeper into the mystery. The subsequent events unfolded like a nightmare. Trailing Mia to a secluded villa, I stumbled upon a grotesque chamber adorned with human skins and was nearly caught by Mia's monstrous boyfriend, who, as it turned out, was not the villain I had imagined. It was in that moment of terror and disbelief that I realized the truth. Mia, the tranquil beauty, was the real monster, wearing the skins of others like garments to maintain her flawless appearance. Her boyfriend was a victim of her vanity, just another of her many discarded shells. Salvation came in the most unexpected form. The class coordinator, previously repulsive in my eyes, intervened with an ancient rite that saved me from sharing the fate of Mia's previous lovers. In the days that followed, as I healed under her care, I found beauty not in the perfection of one's appearance, but in the strength and kindness of the soul. My affections shifted, and I found myself genuinely falling for the woman I had once scorned. But happiness was short-lived. On revealing my feelings, The nightmare resumed, this time with the coordinator revealing herself to be another like Mia, a predator in disguise, seeking to replace her worn-out skin with mine. Humanity's obsession with beauty and the lengths to which people would go to preserve it had ensnared me twice, first with Mia, then with someone I had grown to trust. Trapped in a cycle of deception and transformation, I became a pawn in a game played by those who viewed skin not as a boundary of self, but as a garment to be worn and discarded at whim. As I write this, I've come to understand the true horror isn't in the monsters we become to preserve beauty, but in the monstrous deeds we justify in its name. My story is a plea, a cautionary tale spun from pain and betrayal, urging you to look beyond the surface, for sometimes the most appealing facades hide the darkest depths. I work part-time as a pianist at a local coffee shop. This one time my home piano was out of tune, so I searched online and found a guy, Mr. Smith, a well-experienced piano tuner with a shock of white hair, thin but energetic. He arrived at my place, politely took off his shoes before entering, a habit I found quite unique. While he was admiring a family heirloom, a pendant I accidentally dropped, he stumbled upon an old music score inside my piano. Handwritten and without a title, it was a piece of music I'd never seen before. After Mr. Smith finished tuning, he left, and I, out of curiosity, started playing the piece. It was hauntingly beautiful, but carried a heavy sense of sorrow. It was like nothing I'd ever played before, but oddly familiar, as if it was pulling me in, making it impossible to stop playing. After finishing, I felt an overwhelming sense of grief, as if burdened by an unexplainable sorrow. Concerned about the origins of this mysterious score, I reached out to various music academies and posted it on a music forum, hoping someone could identify it. But no luck. Then, one late evening at the coffee shop, I decided to play this unknown piece again. As I was deeply engrossed, two armed robbers entered, aiming their guns at the manager. Strangely, as they heard the music, they seemed to freeze, completely mesmerized by the tune, eventually fleeing the scene without taking a dime. The manager and I were left in shock, unable to comprehend what just happened. A few days later, I learned from the news about a tragic incident where two individuals identified as the intruders from that night were found deceased after apparently taking their own lives. A witness claimed they saw them leaving a coffee shop right before the act. This incident haunted me, and during a slow night at the coffee shop, a drunken patron challenged me to play something new. Spitefully, I chose the unknown piece. His reaction was of pure horror, his face contorted and his eyes bloodshot. Other patrons and staff, staring in disbelief, looked pale and terrified. Just as I reached the climax of the piece, I was abruptly stopped by a voice shouting, "Stop! Don't play that!" It was my college professor, looking terrified. He explained that the piece was known as the 13th Step, a cursed composition, rumored to drive listeners to despair, even death. The composer, an English artist whose music claimed many lives before disappearing, supposedly destroyed all copies of the score to prevent further tragedy. Shocked, I recalled how the piece came into my possession. Mr. Smith, the piano tuner, was the only link to its origins. When I tried contacting him, his phone number was disconnected. Upon advice from my professor, I destroyed the score and deleted the forum post. But I couldn't shake off the mystery until I received a letter from Mr. Smith explaining his connection to the PC and his previous owner, my great-grandfather, who had studied abroad and possibly encountered the 13th step during his travels. My great-grandfather had replicated the piece from memory before his untimely death, intending it as a lethal weapon. Mr. Smith, who had been a servant in my great-grandfather's household, had held on to the score, hoping to one day return it to the family. Sitting by my piano, I reflected on the dangerous allure of the cursed melody and how close I came to causing harm. The weight of my family's legacy and the mysterious allure of the 13th step lingered in my heart, a chilling reminder of the power of music and its unseen dangers.